the shape charge. The shape charge indicates that they are technically proficient enough to have gone in the prowl. So let's start looking at some recent highline burglaries that have mystified us. Hi folks, welcome to your Fat Egg immediate post-movie reaction pod, coming to you in association with Cinetech, the independent art house cinema where Paul Calf works in the vegetarian cafe. I'd rather see Dave Lee Travis play Macbeth. My name's Alec Anderson and I'm speaking to you 28 hours after I attended the Grosvenor Cinema in Glasgow's leafy West End down in Ashton Lane to see Michael Mann's Ferrari, the latest Michael Mann movie, Ferrari, starring Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz. A film all about sports cars, and the two leads are called Driver and Cruz. That's just the beginning of the genius of Michael Mann. Why was I there? I mean, Thursday, 1 p.m, away a matinee showing of a movie. Well, it's £9. It's cheap. It's the early bird special. And I was sitting there in the cinema before the movie actually started. And I'm the movie. What am I talking about? The film. I was at the pictures and I was waiting for the film to start. And I'm looking round about me. I'm seeing lots of old folk, lots of pensioners. There's a lot of pensioners at this film today, and it slowly dawned on me, Alec, you're 54 years old. The movie you're about to watch is by a director who will turn 81 next month. And young, vital, happening people are at their work at 1 p.m. On a Thursday. They're not sitting at the pictures. And yeah, it has to be said, it's a thing that happens, I think, at my time of life. And I'm speaking to, hopefully, a few other people around about my age out there. If not, if you're younger than that, no, just mark my words. This will be a good lesson for you, something to bear in mind. It really won't. It's just a born old man talking. Your heroes are all dead. No, most of your heroes are dead. Now, your heroes might be, if you're a big English literature student or buff or whatever like that, maybe you're heavily into Shakespeare. Well, he was never alive when you were alive. He was long dead before you appeared in the world, so that's not a problem. You're working off their old work. And that's true for even some of my footballing heroes no longer with us. Writers, movie stars, musicians, etc. They pass away, but their work still remains. Even if it's sports stuff, you can watch it on YouTube and what have you these days. Movie stars, maybe you had the DVD collection going long before they died, so you've always got that to rely on. And there's just so much stuff out there these days with streaming services and, as I say, YouTube and all that kind of stuff. You never really have to let them go, but there is something, even though we know that growing old isn't necessarily a guarantee of accrued wisdom. You don't necessarily get better with age. Somebody in their teens, I know plenty of people younger than that who are a hell of a lot wiser than I am, despite my advanced years. There is that basic instinctive thing where you've got a bit more respect for somebody who's older than you at a basic level, and particularly if they're doing something that you could never dream of doing, like making movies or playing football at international and Champions League level. Put it this way, Davy Weir, the last Rangers player who was older than me to play for Rangers, was Davy Weir. And that was good. I liked that, going along there every week and knowing there was one guy on the park who was very close to my age. There was something really good about it. You could still kind of look up to him in a way that I can't. Even with Messi, I still see him as a wee boy. And he's done stuff that's just beyond anybody that's ever existed on this planet. But he's younger than me, and there's just something about that just takes something away. As you get older, I fight it a lot, but you do acquire cynicism, no matter how counterintuitive you are about becoming the old man who just hates modern football kind of blindly. You can't help it. Things, if nothing else, if you don't get cynical, you don't get the same thrill from stuff as you're older as you did when you're younger. So it's really nice for me that Michael Mann, somebody who is, almost 30 years older than me, is still out there doing the work that he's doing. Now, obviously, authors and directors, movie stars, even it's different from being a sportsman. They can perform as long as they've still got their wits about them. They can keep performing, however old they get, and that's nice. But I think if you're my age, this last week or so will have been really weird. First of all, it's winter break and the injuries are healing. Winter break, the new signings arrive. Your chairman's rich and your manager's baldy. So hush, little bear cub, don't you cry. Rangers are away in La Manga. They're in Spain during the SPFL Premiership, winter shutdowns, closed for about 3 weeks, I think, the top flight in Scotland. So Rangers away, we've got a friendly tomorrow in Spain against Hertha Berlin. Hertha Berlin, that's live on, I think, the Rangers YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch that. I've got other stuff I'll be eating and drinking that's far too important for me to pay attention to that tomorrow. On Tuesday night, we see this season's Champions League kind of Scandinavian adventurers, FC Copenhagen. FC Copenhagen, they're arriving at Ibrox for a friendly. I've seen them before. They're money's tight. We've all been spending a lot over the festive period. It's the first few days of January, the first couple of weeks of January. Money's too tight to mention, and I had to make a wee choice. I've seen Copenhagen at Ibrox in the Champions League playoff round, I think it was, when Alec McLeish was manager back there. And although I wasn't at the away leg, I have been to the Parken Stadium. I've seen Copenhagen playing at home, at their home. 2016, the summer of 2016, I was in Copenhagen on holiday at my birthday. It was actually during that week, and on the date of my birthday, Copenhagen were at home to Lyngby in the Danish top flight. That's great. That's that sorted. My birthday present's all sorted. Away we went. Great cultural experience. Because I'm Scottish, and what I mean by cultural experience is I was allowed to drink in the concourse. That's as cultural as I like to get. Still feels really transgressive to somebody who was brought up in the days of the 1980 Cup final riot and the drink being banned at Scottish football, Scottish venues, Scottish sporting venues, Scottish arenas in general. And the Danes weren't just drinking the pints of Carlsberg, as you would expect. But if you've ever been to that part of the world, you'll notice they're heavily into these shots. These shots, I think it's schnapps, and they're in test tubes. So that through the whole game, and the standard wasn't very good, let's be honest. The standard wasn't great in 2016 in that particular match. The punters are spending more time going back to the concourse to get the beers in than they were watching the game itself. And there was a bit of fighting outside, just wee boys pretending they're in the football factory, hoping the police will break them up. But in the stadium itself, everybody's too busy getting bevied to get into bother. Everybody's too busy bothering the bevy to be bothered. Really chilled out atmosphere. It was really nice. And interestingly, I'm seeing the two teams that Rangers have played on their two competitive visits to the Parken Stadium, the Danish National Stadium. Because other than that time, we played Copenhagen. Remember, we played Lyngby in the 1992-93 Champions League. The earlier rounds were still calling it the European Cup at that stage. We had to beat Lyngby to get through to the game against Leeds United. The Battle of Britain, which was to settle the first British side ever to play in the Champions League group stages, the first ever Champions League group stages. Yes, it was us, we know that, but there I was watching the two teams that Rangers had played in the Parken Stadium playing each other. And that level of kind of football anal retentiveness means that when Rangers are playing for real, when we're on active duty, I put so much emotion into it. It just drains me of so much emotion that I'm quite happy to take a wee break. Got to make a choice with the money. The friendlies this season I've been to, I know I wasn't at the Newcastle friendly, but we lost that, and then we had HSV, HSV, we had Hamburg, who are a second tier German side. We struggled to beat them 2-1, and Olympiacos kicked our asses, and it was bad signs for Michael Beale. That all came to pass. Michael Beale had to go, so I'm not really that keen in friendlies this season. No Anorak hit to be against, so I just thought I'm going to spend my money going to see Michael Mann, because this month, as I'm saying, it's an age thing. This last week, it's been really weird. People of my age, I keep talking about, I'm born in 1969, so my memories start when about mid to kind of late 70s. It's just been terrible. We had Franz Beckenbauer dying. And of course, the time I'm growing up, the only chance I would get to see Franz Beckenbauer playing live, it's not like now I'm going to do my war years thing, sound like somebody that's been through rationing in the Blitz. You only had 2 live football matches on telly, and it was the FA Cup final, the Scottish Cup final, and the Scotland-England game. Of course, you had European finals if a British team were in them, a major European club tie featuring a British team was sometimes be live on the telly, and it was World Cups and European Championships if any of the home nations were featuring in them. And they didn't. When I was a lad, I don't remember the 1974 World Cup. I was just too young to kind of remember that. The first World Cup I remember is 1978, and Beckenbauer wasn't at that one, having been the World Cup winning captain in 74. But yeah, I saw him playing against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. It was the highlights on Sports Scene. He was playing for Hamburg in the 81-82 UEFA Cup. It was the last 16 match. Hamburg lost that final. They lost the final that year. They put out Aberdeen quite narrowly. Aberdeen beat them at Pittodrie. And that year, the following season, Hamburg won the European Cup. Aberdeen won the Cup Winners' Cup. And the two of them played in the Super Cup final, which Aberdeen commemorate on their strip. If you think that's something you should do, commemorate the Charity Shield of European football. But anyway, you're welcome, Dons, because Rangers, of course, invented the Super Cup. That's the level of football I'm kind of into, quite anal retentive when it comes to this stuff. But yeah, so Franz Beckenbauer, he dies last week. Was it Monday this week? He passed away, the legend, and you kind of think that's just a name. Even though I never got to see him playing live in the flesh, that's the way it was in those days. You didn't get to see him playing live even on the television, but he was in all the magazines or newspaper stuff you're starting to read as a kid, and it was always the three best players in the world, the three greatest players of all time in the 70s. According to the 1970s, were Pele, Beckenbauer and Cruyff. That's what it was always between. And Franz Beckenbauer, he's no longer with us. And that's a kind of a noise from my childhood. And then there was JPR Williams. I know, because there was no football on the television, and you're a working class boy from Ardrossan. I wasn't old enough yet to be getting taken to the football, juniors or otherwise, in any kind of regular basis. And the Five Nations, and the rugby, the international rugby, would always be live on Grandstand on the BBC, on one of the 3 terrestrial channels, free to view, that were available to us back in those days. And I would watch it, and it'd be a kind of painful thing, because you're thinking, this looks like a football. It's a football-sized crowd. There's 50, 60,000 in these national stadiums, and there's grass on the pitch. It looks like a football-sized pitch. It's 80 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes, but that's roughly the same length. And you've got, because it was amateur still in those days, the rugby, the strips were really basic, but all the better for it. Apart from the French, they all had a bit of flair, just to remind you that they were French in their kit. But you would just think, why do they keep picking the ball up and running into each other? That's really spoiling this. But JPR Williams, I don't know how posh JPR Williams was. I know the Welsh, the rugby union scene in Wales, a bit more egalitarian, more working class than, certainly the English scene anyway, or the non-border scene in Scotland. But the 3 letters, JP, no, he wasn't a Dave or an Alfie or anything like that, or a big Peter, and it was JPR Williams, the 3 initials. That was kind of posh and weird. I think he was actually a doctor or something, JPR Williams, really clever guy. But so it sounded different to hear his name, and then he looked different. And even the little I knew about rugby union, except that I hated it for not being football, he was doing stuff that was clearly very, very skillful and very clever. So, anytime Scotland were playing Wales in those days when I was a kid, thanks very much to JPR Williams for lighting up my life. But he's no longer with us. And then there's Starsky and Hutch, David Soul. Hutch, he died. Was this a week ago? Was it last Friday? That's an absolute killer as well. 80 years old, a fair innings, but my God, it was that was a boot to the Mohawks, because Starsky and Hutch was, again, iconic when I was a kid. The theme tune, I couldn't tell you a single thing about a single Starsky and Hutch episode. Don't remember any of the plots or anything. But I know that in every single one of them, Antonio Fargas playing Huggy Bear was a wee bit dodgy. He was up to something, but he had a heart of gold. He meant well in the long run. And then the captain, he was always gutting them out. He was always angry and raging and sending them home and telling them to get their act together. But he had a heart of gold, and he really wanted to look after them in the long run. And Starsky and Hutch were the 2 coolest dudes in Christendom. They were the 2 coolest guys alive, and every boy at school wanted to be them. They were absolutely fantastic. They wanted to be in their motor as well. Was it a 4 Gran Torino? A red thing with a lovely white flash down the side of it. And I remember when I was just too young, I think it was a Friday night, it was on the television, being heartbroken, lying in my bed through my bedroom, and I can hear the theme tune going on in the living room, and making excuses to get up and go through and peek in the living room door and try and watch a wee bit of it, and getting sent back to my bed. I remember my aunt and uncle, when they were babysitting for us, my mum and dad were out one Friday night, being particularly evil. Listen to this. I was trying to persuade them to let me stay up to watch Starsky and Hutch. And I must have got to watch it plenty of times, because, I physically remember sitting watching it, but maybe I was too young at this point in time. They told me, how evil's this, that John Gregg, who was the only other guy in the world I thought was cooler than Starsky and Hutch. I thought it was cooler than it. John Gregg was just, Rangers supporters my age, John Gregg was just a hero. It was like John Wayne and Starsky and Hutch all rolled into one. He went to his bed before 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And yeah, Bampots, how sneaky is that? That is playing dirty. Putting John Gregg up against my desire to stay up and watch Starsky and Hutch. So off I went to bed, knowing that I had to if the great man did that. And it was only years later when the same aunt and uncle passed on a lot of their programmes to me. I wasn't at the John Gregg testimonial. Well, we played a Scotland select side at Ibrox. Too young. Again, they gave me the programme from that game and I was reading through it and I saw the bit that's like, John Gregg's such a professional, because in the 1970s most footballers, as I've said before on podcasts, would be out in the pub at 9 o'clock on a Friday night and probably going to a nightclub before they were playing at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. So John Gregg would seem psychotically dedicated, but there it is in the programme notes. John Gregg's such a good professional that he would go to his bed at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And I thought, yeah, Bampots. But yeah, I eventually did get to see Starsky and Hutch, and the thing is, Michael Mann wrote 4 episodes of Starsky and Hutch when he was just starting out in TV before going on to do what he really wanted to do, was write and direct his own movies. When he was starting out in the industry, he wrote 4 of the earlier episodes of Starsky and Hutch. I think it was in the first couple of series of it. So there you go. This guy was, even though I hadn't heard of Michael Mann, I didn't really know about him, I don't think, until I went to see Heat, probably his most famous, most successful, probably most critically acclaimed movie. Yeah, that was a big turning point for me. I remember I was at Starsky and Hutch, that's my childhood, and then you move up into my teens, maybe into my early 20s. I don't know the exact years of Miami Vice, the TV series, which he created, and wrote and directed a lot of the episodes, but it took off after that without him. I think it would hand over the reins to various directors and writers, but it's his baby. He basically invented Miami Vice, which was just basically a 1980s Florida Starsky and Hutch, Crockett and Tubbs, and it just hit me just at the right time. I was, I don't know, maybe 14 to, I don't know how long Miami Vice lasted on the television. I was certainly kind of just coming out of school and just getting into, I basically left school early so I could watch Rangers and chase women. That was just perfect timing as far as the Miami Vice was, because I was experimenting like everybody else of my age with the fluorescent coloured canvas, your kind of chinos and what have you, the rolled up sleeves, all the kind of powder blues and the pink stuff, the canvas shoes, that kind of stuff. Absolutely embarrassing. I'm just thinking of Vic and Bob. I looked slightly different. That's what people were wearing at the time. But yeah. And it was supposed to be kind of sensitive as well. It was really sensitive, even though guys weren't scared. I think the same thing had been levelled at Starsky and Hutch by older TV watchers in the day. The men were a bit sissy-like, their hair was too long and they were showing their emotions. Well, they really went for it in Miami Vice. They did Michael Mann, and it was great. It was like, even when you're feeling down, even when a woman's left you, you can stand, on the front of your yacht that you live on in the harbour somewhere in Miami, the Florida wind going through your lightly tinted, your blonde tints in your hair, while Phil Collins in There Tonight plays in the background, and your pet, you don't have a dog, you've got a crocodile or an alligator, was it, as a pet. You're just so cool that even when you're actually on a downer, you're just making yourself more attractive to women. It's kind of that kind of extravagant, almost rococo type of kind of existential angst. Oh God, I'm feeling it so bad that I must just look so sexy. And so Miami Vice hit me hard. Again, I couldn't tell you a single thing. There's a couple I remember. I remember a couple of what happened in a couple of the episodes, but I watched it every week religiously, and I can't remember a thing about it, except that it was cool. It was so cool. Was Miami Vice. And then I think I watched the film The Keep. I don't know when I saw that. I definitely remember watching it, in later years when I was going through Michael Mann's back catalogue and thinking, yeah, I've watched this before. It's not like a film you would forget, really. It's, he's basically dealt with every kind of genre almost. Michael Mann, he dealt with 2 or 3 in The Keep. It's kind of fantasy, horror, supernatural, Second World War, lots of different stuff involved in that. Tangerine Dream with the music, the futuristic music, that was the start, of Michael Mann's reputation for doing a great score, a very self-conscious score. He'd done it in Miami Vice, as I said. It was really hip score to all the episodes of Miami Vice. But yeah, I loved The Keep, and then I came across Manhunter, and again at these points I don't know if I'm aware that it is Michael Mann that's behind all this stuff. You're just taking stuff in those days. You just want to watch as much as you possibly can. And Manhunter just blew me away. Absolutely fantastic film. Very scary, very violent, very creepy, but utterly enthralling, and by far and away a different exploration, a different use of the Hannibal Lecter stuff, the Robert Harris stuff, which just became, by the time Anthony Hopkins got involved in it, kind of slasher porn, really pornographic stuff, pretty childish, pretty clatty. And, you know, if you want to seem a bit pretentious, you're supposed to say that in Manhunter, the Hannibal Lecter character is in it as played by Scottish actor Brian Cox. And you're supposed to say, yeah, he was much better than Anthony Hopkins. That's up for debate, but it definitely was cool. And it was very different. It was all, in Manhunter, it's all, everybody's wearing white. And again, the chinos and no socks on and stuff like that. Everybody's blonde with a little bit of perm going on. It was all very trendy, Art Deco buildings, modernist buildings all over the place, lots of white buildings. But it was a fantastic film. Tom Noonan playing the Tooth Fairy, who is very reminiscent. He's the serial killer in the film, but very reminiscent of the Rangers manager just now, Mr. Clement. That's the first person I thought he looked like when he arrived at Rangers. Yeah, it was a fantastic film, but again, I don't even know if I clocked that it was Michael Mann or really cared at that point. What happened was, in 1995, at some point in 1995, I don't remember the exact date, I really should, given everything that's happened since then, I was on a date. I was single and trying not to be, and I was on a date with a girl who was doing... she was staying down south at the time, but she was doing a kind of one of these media, was it film and TV or something like that, one of these courses at college, and we went to the cinema. We went to the old ABC in Sauchiehall Street to see this film in which Robert De Niro and Al Pacino were going to be on screen together for the first time ever, acting together, because obviously technically they're on screen together at certain points in Godfather 2 as Vito Corleone's, the memories of Vito Corleone's young life, you know, kind of recede in the same frame as Al Pacino's Michael Corleone starts coming to the fore again, as that goes back and forth, the prolepsis stuff. But this was them actually acting together in the same film. And if you've seen the film Righteous Kill, which also stars the fantastic Brian Dennehy that came out a few years later, you'll know that just having the right actors is no guarantee that a film's going to be any good. But I was so excited about that, just seeing those two, because at that point in time I'm already watching, you know, I'm Godfather, Daft, and Raging Bull. I loved Raging Bull and that kind of stuff, and Mean Streets, you know, the De Niro and Scorsese stuff, a lot of the Francis Ford Coppola stuff. So this was fantastic. Again, I probably didn't really care about Michael Mann, although I'd be taking note, no doubt, of this director who'd brought the two of them together. And it was a really strange day in the cinema. The cinema was absolutely packed. I think back on it, I feel like I was sitting in the Copeland Wood stand. It felt like a football match, and the place was bristling with excitement. I think there must have been lots of film students there or something, or film lecturers, because if you've seen Heat, and you should, there's... one of the things about Michael Mann is he just is terrible with dialogue for women. He does terribly unrealistic dialogue for women. A lot of times when it comes to the emotional stuff between couples, he wants them to talk in aphorisms almost. It's quite weird. And I don't know if it's the bit where Diane Venora, who's playing Justine Hanna, Vincent Hanna, the Al Pacino character's wife, his third wife, he comes back from... I've got three dead bodies on a sidewalk off Venice Beach. Justine, I'm sorry if the goddamn chicken got overcooked. And she's said to him, every time I try to maintain a consistent mood between us, you withdraw. And that's a line which is so preposterous and yet hilarious, absolutely brilliant. It's got to the point where my wife actually says that to me when she wants to piss me off. She's wanting to get me back for something, you know, every time I try to maintain a consistent mood between us, because she just guffawed out loud the first time we watched that together, and I was totally insulted. You know, you're insulting, you're blaspheming, but it's hilarious. And there was people shouting out at these lines from the cinema. It was an active thing. They watched a cup final or something. And then, of course, you know, so many other things happen in the film, but if you know it at all, you will know it for the shootout scene set in downtown LA when the bank heist at the centre of the movie goes wrong, or seems to have gone right, and then the police are waiting outside. for Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, and his crew. And I was just sitting there mesmerised. Now, I'd grown up, as I say, at the time I grew up, in the 70s mostly, a really weird, sick thing went on, and you'll know this if you're of my age, where everybody was massively into the Second World War. Now, my grandparents, I've got medals here. Big Davy, who's like my step grandpa, my paternal grandmother, her husband died way before I was born, back in the 60s. So she married again in the 80s. And Big Davy, big gentleman, he'd been in the RAF ground staff over in India during the Second World War and stuff like that. And yet we're going about treating it as a kind of leisure industry as kids, buying Airfix. I had Stukas, like model Stukas, hanging in Heinkels, like German bombers, the planes that had devastated Britain during the Blitz from London to Clydebank. I've got models of them hanging from my ceiling, and I had a Wehrmacht bigger than the actual Wehrmacht. I was in Harris's assault, getting my OOHO scale German infantry every other week so they could fight my Gurkhas and my commandos and that. It was absolutely sick. One of the worst things ever to happen to humanity, and kids all across Britain were revelling in it every week. So you'd watch lots of war films as well. You thought you were machine guns. You loved machine gun fire. What you thought was machine gun fire, that was always the exciting bit, and you could identify the machine guns because those guys in your family who'd held those machine guns. And then you would watch the news. You're getting older, stuff happening in Northern Ireland and various other hotspots throughout the world, various other conflicts, and you would get to hear what real gunfire sounded like. And it was a lot flatter and a lot duller, but somehow much louder and much more scary because it was real. And you could tell the violence was inherent in the sound of real gunfire. So I'm sitting watching Heat, and I've had my training. I've heard enough fake and real gunfire in my time, even though I was just in my mid-20s at this point. Just on the telly, of course. I've never been involved in it. I'm no hero. I'm no fit for being in the army or anything like that. Playing with soldiers, is all I'm good for. But like that has to be real gunfire. That is real gunfire there. We're hearing, and we go into, after the movie's over, we go over to Shenanigans, which was the bar at the time, huge bar. I don't know if it's, can he still be there? It's a while since I've been out in Sauchiehall Street. My days of going to the garage and all that are long behind me. But we're in this huge bar, Shenanigans, sitting having a drink after the movie, and we're just supposed to be chilling, and I'm talking to this girl, and I'm saying that gunfire and the shootout scene, that has to be real. That blanks or whatever, that was, she's like, no. She did a course. This was her expertise. She got into production and I saw on the BBC and stuff like that. She said no, and quite rightly, in movies they always add the gunfire, the sound, and even the flash of flame at the end of the gun barrel. That's always added post-production. Those actors were just running about in downtown LA, making no sound, just basically like you used to be as a kid, Alec, when you're playing British and Jerry's, as we all did in those days. And I'm like, no, it can't be. And she was getting raging, and quite rightly so, because this was her area of expertise, and she was right, that's what usually happened. And I just was like, no, that must have been real. It was so realistic. I've never heard anything like that. I was captivated, totally enthralled by it. I was still buzzing off it, I think. And it's like if she started trying to tell me, something about Rangers, or no, Rangers actually won the Cup in 1973. I'm like, you don't understand. I would have been raging with her as well, but I just couldn't let it go. And that was the end of that date. I went home alone, to quote another movie title. But it was. You can see the DVDs behind my shoulder here. The first DVD, I straight away, that was more than enough of a hook to make me want to see the film again. And I think it was the Blockbuster video era. So I got it in VHS tape and I hired it out a few times until it actually came out. You could buy your own copy, and I did that. And then the DVD comes out a couple of years later. But I think it was a good 10 years at least after Heat had hit the cinema that they brought out the top DVD, you see there, which was the one with extras. It had extra features on it and stuff actually discussing the making of the movie. And straight away, I hit that. I mean, that was the time that came out, the cult of Heat had got to fever pitch. So guys like myself were going absolutely nuts the day that was released. Got it straight away, get it at home, pop on. And if I don't watch the film, I don't watch the movie, I watch all the extras to find out what else I can about the making of the movie. Straight away, Michael Mann discussing, yeah, we used live rounds or blanks or what have you. So it was real gunfire. That's all part of the verisimilitude. And happily married to somebody completely different, and I have been for years. I was sitting watching that video, thinking about that pair lassie that we made to go on that date with me, giving it, yes, told you, I knew it, yes. She's away having a great career in television, probably, and it doesn't give me a second thought. But that was the way Heat got me, and suddenly I knew about Michael Mann, and after that, it became, put it this way, 15th of July 2008, which, a good 13 years after I first saw Heat. I'm walking down South Cicero Avenue in Chicago, and it's the day that our flight is leaving Chicago to get us back to Glasgow, the last day of a holiday in Chicago, and I've planned badly. Unlike Neil McCauley in Heat, I've planned badly, because if you know anything about Heat, you'll know that it's based on a real life cops and robbers situation. The character played by Robert De Niro, Neil McCauley, was a real life guy. His 110th birthday's coming up. He was born early February 1914, and he died on the 25th of March 1964. And it was, unlike the film, it was outside the heist that the movie is based on. He didn't get away. His man got him. The Vincent Hanna character is actually a chap called Chuck Adamson, who was a writer. It was a hardcore, robbery homicide division in Chicago cop, where you just get shot to kill. But he eventually became, when he retired, he became an advisor and a writer, an advisor to TV programs and films. And this is how Michael Mann got to know him, and he heard the story of him, meeting up. This hardened criminal came into Chicago called Neil McCauley, and he really liked the way he did things. The things that happened in the movie Heat are all based on stuff that happened between Chuck Adamson and the real Neil McCauley back in the 60s in Chicago. Real hard city. And yeah, I had to go to the scene, the actual shootout, not the bank heist. It wasn't a bank heist. It was a branch of a kind of it's a supermarket. I think it's the National Tea Company, it was called, and it's like a kind of supermarket come chain grocery store. We're talking, say, early 60s here, and they would take kind of payroll money and what have you on a Friday, and Neil McCauley's crew had targeted this place, and Chuck Adamson and his crew of cops were waiting outside for them, and when they come out, they just gunned them down. A gun battle ensued, and they gunned them down. And I wanted to, although the National Tea Company is long gone, there's obviously another business in the same building, that same street, that same address still exists, 4720 South Cicero Avenue. And Cicero is one of the streets, and it's like Route 66. No, it's like in the States, if you've been to Canada or whatever like that, they have streets that basically are the length of a continent. It's one of those never-ending streets. And I had got myself on the CTA, I got myself to the nearest, I think it was a subway station or whatever it was. It was a train line, I can't remember. And I thought, I'm going to try and walk it. And I just didn't have time. I couldn't. It was too far. I wasn't going to make it. And for some reason, I wasn't flagging a taxi down. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe stuff I'd been advised not to do by a few of the folk at the hotel. But I didn't do it. I planned badly, and it miffs me to this day that I never got to the actual site. I was on Chicago on holiday with my missus. It's the summer of 2008. We're there for 10 days, and I feel terrible. But I think back on it, I feel terrible. Why could I not have pushed it harder and got there? Just take a wee day out, and down we go. It'd be an adventure. I don't know if it was kind of rough. It's kind of, and there's a few, like Cabrini Green and what have you. There's a few really dodgy areas in Chicago where you will die if you go there as an outsider. So I don't know if it's part of that. I needed to go myself. So you're on holiday with the wife. You don't want to leave her in the hotel room while you go and get yourself killed for the sake of a movie that you watched 13 years ago. But Chicago, so much of the stuff that I'm into, we're talking about non-Ranger stuff here, like the Chicago Bears. People think I walk about wearing a Chicago Bears baseball cap because the Bears, they wear red, white and blue with a bit of orange. They're called the Bears. It's just a Rangers tie-in. It's no. I actually love the 1985, the 85 Bears. They won the Super Bowl 20, and not just because of the fridge, who's the same size as me and managed to get yourself a Super Bowl ring. I just love the whole ethos of that team. Just a bunch of Grabowskis, and the fact that the tension, the hatred between head coach Mike Ditka and the defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan just brought out this record-breaking, phenomenal sides. And they hammered the Patriots on Belichick leaving the Patriots just now, but they hammered the Patriots in the final, obviously, or the final, sorry, the Super Bowl 20. But I absolutely love the Bears, but I'm there in the summertime. It's off season for the NFL. But I went out to the Mistake by the Lake, went out to the new Soldier Field, and I got myself my baseball cap that I still wear to this day. It's pretty clatty in there. It's the only hat I've ever had that fits my massive head. In America, everything's bigger, and I love Saul Bellow, who was brought up in Chicago. He was born in Canada, but brought up in Chicago, and he writes The Adventures of Augie March, which is one of the greatest books of all time. I think it won the Pulitzer. I think it won the Nobel Prize for Fiction. Sorry, not the Pulitzer, the Nobel Prize for Fiction. I think it won. It's a phenomenal book. You've got to read The Adventures of Augie March, and a lot of that's all Chicago stuff. Hemingway, I've not read any other writer as much as I've read Hemingway. He's brought up in Oak Park, which is a suburb of Chicago, so I went out there and you do the Oak Park tour, and that's so the Frank Lloyd Wright buildings as well, architecture stuff, Mies van der Rohe, Frank Gehry. It's so much to see in Chicago city centre, State Street, that great street, you're doing Bevan and what have you. It was the summer of 2008, after the longest Rangers season. The most football matches I've ever been to in my life was that season. I think Rangers, was it 68 games we played? It's the most any Scottish football side had ever played, the most competitive matches we'd ever played. We got to the final in Manchester, and we'd been in the Champions League, and I'd been to the Nou Camp, and I went down to Manchester as well, and I went to, I think I'm 2/3 all in of all the games we played, and I was going to a lot of juniors games and Scotland games and that as well. It was just wild times for me, so I was actually needing a bit of a holiday, and I'm just giving you all my excuses for not getting down there, for not getting down to Cicero properly and getting to the site of that. But when I'm got myself that much into Heat and the backstory of Heat that I'm doing that, what is it? What has Michael Mann done? And I don't know what it is. It's just, it's not even my favourite. Is he my favourite director? It is my favourite director, he has to be. But Heat's not what I would call my favourite movie. You know what it's like to have a favourite movie is a bit retrograde. You really want to, most people have a kind of, you've got a kind of circle, a kind of rotation of 5 or 6, maybe even a dozen favourite movies, which depending on your mood, you'll pick one out. One will suddenly become your favourite for a few months, maybe a year or so. And as you get older, you drop ones off and add other ones in. But for example, I'm pretty basic. There's nothing very original with my favourite films. I was obviously the first two Godfather films. I love them. Raging Bull, American History X, Mean Streets. I like 24 Hour Party People. That's a great film. I really like that. But as I said in Jersey a few weeks ago, if there was one film I had to watch for the rest of my life, I would probably pick something like Ang Lee's Sense and Sensibility or Kieslowski's White from the Three Colours trilogy, because they're really uplifting, heartwarming films, genuine, not kind of tearjerker, weepy for the sake of it, but they've got properly uplifting moments in them that really do make your heart sing, so to speak. And Heat is just bleak. I mean, the Waingro character in Heat is a psychopathic, kind of really detestable coward who kills sex workers, as a hobby. There's not a lot of redeeming features for any of the characters in Heat. The two protagonists, De Niro and Pacino's characters, one loves killing people in the name of the law, the other one loves killing people, or doesn't love killing, but he will not think twice. I will not hesitate, not for a second, to kill folk. And there's a lot of machismo there, obviously, and there's not really a lot to recommend it from a moral or a political point of view. But no film fascinates me the way Heat does. No film has got under my skin the way that one has, and no director, therefore, can be said to have done that the way Michael Mann has. Hello, is it Olivier Assayas with the two films with Kristen Stewart he's done? The Personal Shopper and Clouds of Sils Maria. They are phenomenal movies. I love the two of them. They really got under my skin. But yeah, Heat, I can't get away from it at all. So when was it, 2009, then the following year after my sojourn to Chicago itself, it was revealed that Michael Mann was going to be bringing out a John Dillinger biopic, basically, The Public Enemies. This film he's going to bring out, Public Enemies, the 20s, 30s gangster scene in Chicago. Not Michael Mann from Chicago, obviously heavily into the kind of criminal underworld scene in Chicago. He worked with, I've seen most of Michael Mann films. I haven't seen Black Hat, which came out in 2015. Chris Hemsworth totally bombed. I haven't seen that. I don't think it's been released in Britain. So it's hard to get a hold of. You can't get it on Amazon Prime. It comes up, but you can't get into it. And there was a film he did, I think, a TV movie called The Jericho Mile, maybe late 70s, when it was really first starting out in movies. And that was all filmed with inmates. I think it was in Alcatraz. So he spent a lot of time working with actual criminals, convicts, and he brings them into his movies to make them more realistic. Yeah. So when he said he was going to be doing something about John Dillinger and the whole kind of Chicago gangster scene of that era, you think this is going to be sensational. Johnny Depp's cast as Dillinger, great casting, perfect director. What a topic! This is, I need to see this, and I remember going to see it, and it was great. You know, it was kind of enjoyable as it went along, and I think it did okay at the box office as well. But I felt kind of cold. It just didn't happen for me. When I came out the cinema, I wasn't needing to see it again. Stephen Graham was cast as Babyface Nelson, fantastic. I couldn't wait. Didn't happen. Just didn't happen for me at all. And I don't know if it's Heat had just set the bar so high. I've tried to watch these films again. It's the same with Ali, Will Smith and the Muhammad Ali biopic. You're like, this is going to be fantastic. And John Voight's in there, who plays Nate. And I'm actually not going to talk about Heat because I'll be here all night, as I already have been. He's in that as well. He's fantastic. And I may be using the words fantastic and phenomenal a lot. Sorry about that. My movies lexicon is every bit as limited as my football lexicon, but again, everything was technically correct. The boxing scenes were really well done, and it was ticking off all the appropriate boxes, no pun intended, when it came to Ali's life, getting through them all. But it looked great, but I felt nothing. I didn't really feel it, and I've watched it again recently, and I had to remind myself that I'd watched it again recently because it just, nothing happened there. But I find myself trying to get in The Insider, which Russell Crowe and Al Pacino, all about a whistleblower in the Big Tobacco. That was a phenomenal film. I've said it again, phenomenal. I can't help myself. It's because I'm talking about Michael Mann. That was great. It really got to me, that one. And it was a really low-key movie. And I didn't see it at the pictures. That's when I didn't see it at the movies, even though I was right into Michael Mann officially at this point. It just crept up on me. Ironically, it's a film about cigarettes, and it's a slow burner. The film itself is a slow burner. There's not a lot of violence in it. There's threats of violence. I don't think there's any violence, actual violence in it. But really moving. Some fantastic moments in that film where you're just sitting there and your heart is... And it's all about Big Tobacco, and it's all about news media, investigative journalism, the politics of, mainstream television news. I think Christopher Plummer in it as well, playing real life characters. Really, really moving, really fantastic. So it's not that I'm just into purely machismo stuff and I would just want to see lots of machine guns and lots of action, a big fiend for action. I blew away Frankie Arnold in Chicago and he was a fucking maniac. It's not that kind of thing. It's just there's something well done. When I saw Heat, I'd never seen a movie that looked like it. Dante Spinotti's cinematography. And the thing with the Heat is now nearly 30 years old. So cinematography has advanced so far since then, and Michael Mann has been at the forefront of that. He used it in the Miami Vice movie. I think, when was that? 2006, 2007. Digital cameras, the forerunners of HD and stuff like that. And he used it in Public Enemies as well. It didn't work as well in Public Enemies because it was kind of content versus form. It wasn't working, but it worked superbly in Miami Vice, which is a movie that takes a lot of heat, takes a lot of slagging off critics, and it is a bit corny, a bit exploitative, glamorous women and men doing a lot of violence to women and shooting folk and what have you, which happens in Heat as well. But it ticks a lot of the machismo boxes. But it's phenomenal. It's great fun. It really works. It's got a fantastic pace to it. And Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell are just OTT enough. Colin Farrell in particular. I loved it. Absolutely loved Miami Vice, the movie. So it's been hit and miss since then. I say he's 81 years old now, Michael Mann. It's not a surprise that he's not churning out winners every time he makes a movie these days. But I really had to go and see Ferrari yesterday because he's a hero of mine, Michael Mann. He's done great work throughout his life, and he's made me very, very happy at various stages in my life. I used to come in and I would put Heat on the way. I'd come in drunk on a Friday night out or something like that, and you get in and I would chuck Heat on the way you would come in drunk and chuck on an album and put on favourite tracks. I would put on favourite scenes. We do this now. You can do it. I don't even have to put a DVD in now. It's on Netflix. You can just access it there. It's absolutely, I'm going to say phenomenal or fantastic, but I would thoroughly recommend it if you haven't seen it. So this is what led me to yesterday having to go and make a point of going to see Ferrari, to stand by an artist that I really admire and respect, and has given me a lot of good times in my life. So he had a new movie out and I had to go and see it, and this pod has gone on long enough, and I will give it a much shorter, much crisper, but a proper review of Ferrari in the next pod. Thanks for listening, folks.